think this is the worst decision that's ever happened in professional sports. And I'm dead serious when I say that.
I like that Rob Parker has strong takes, has a strong stance. The only problem is that a little bit later, it's not so strong anymore. If you really feel the way that you just felt, you shouldn't be defeated by maybe sort of half of a decent point by someone else.
It changes what the essence of the game has always been, which is about competition.
Amen. Hear, hear. Great point. But a little bit later, it becomes about, well, someone else did it too. Therefore, sacrificing these great things about the sport we loved is fine because someone else was guilty of nepotism previously.
You have an NFL where you have essentially 99% of the owners are white, and yet the league is 70% black. They didn't go out and just fill their teams with people who look like them because they own the team and said, I don't care. I'm going to do what I want to do, and no one can tell me because I own the team. It was about the best people went out there, played the game, and the people who deserve to get jobs got jobs.
That's an interesting point because Chris Broussard in a little bit is going to say that nepotism is rampant in the NBA. But Rob Parker is making the point, if it was rampant, then these people wouldn't have good teams. If you're filling up your roster with people who are friends of yours rather than who can actually do the best job of winning games for you, then you're not going to have much of a franchise. So the ultimate question is, what's the most important thing? You know, legacies, nepotism, using your power when you have the chance to use your power, or building a powerful franchise and that sports franchise being about winning. So LeBron James is taking sports in the other direction. He's saying, hey, prioritizing what's best for the franchise actually isn't what's important. Making dreams come true for people like me matters more. I don't like his argument on multiple levels. The first level I already covered. I don't think it's a very inspiring argument to say it's fine to do this because other people have done it, when nobody really likes that it's happening. I mean, as a fan, you don't. As a fan, you barely care about the signings of front office staff and assistant coaching staff, because that's 90% of what we're talking about here. Filling positions that fans don't really care about and you haven't heard about. You haven't heard about these things until these talk shows dig up information to try and build their argument. So that's one side of the argument. The other one is him pretending that it's rampant, claiming that it's rampant with players. It's not just coaching staff, according to him, it's players. Well, if it is rampant, please come to your own podcast prepared to give more than 2 examples. I don't think 2 examples counts as rampant.
And there are players, it's not just front office and coaching staff where we've seen this. Thanasis Antetokounmpo. Think he's much of a player?
But,
No.
wait a minute. The difference,
He's on the Bucks.
Okay, but was he? Well, who drafted him?
I don't know who drafted him, but he's got a contract now with the Bucks.
What do you mean you don't know who drafted him? He's your example. Research your own example. You're doing this for a living. You're getting paid to do this.
Because Giannis is on the Bucks.
No, but the Knicks drafted him. And let me say this, Chris. I'm glad you brought that up. That came after Giannis's first year when he averaged 6 points and 4 rebounds. So it wasn't as if he was a big star and they knew it. Giannis didn't even blossom yet when the Knicks drafted his brother.
Okay, so is Thanasis a good example? A lot of people aren't impressed with Thanasis, but it's one example. That's a long way from proving that it's a rampant problem with players. The Bucks didn't give up a draft position. The Bucks didn't give up a draft spot for Thanasis. Hard to believe that the Knicks even drafted Thanasis because of Giannis, especially if Giannis was scoring 6 points back then. It's a bad example. And it's only one example. You know, if you have a spot at the end of your bench for a player, that's different than giving up a draft pick and paying your second round draft pick $7 million a year while you're simultaneously talking about not having enough money to bring in more help for LeBron. Then Broussard tries to say that this might have happened even without LeBron's influence.
It's possible that Bronny would have got drafted.
No, it's not. And you know it's not. But more importantly, Broussard changed subjects. He had nothing to come back at Rob Parker with when Rob Parker showed that his Thanasis example was BS. And Broussard changes the subject. Unfortunately, Rob Parker allows him to change the subject. He doesn't say, hey, you didn't finish this. So, but you know what? You can't destroy your co-host. I wish he'd be a little bit meaner.
Why was Rich Paul calling around? If it was like, man, please, we ain't thinking about no Bronny James. Why was Rich Paul calling and texting teams saying don't draft him?
You, Chris Broussard, you are the answer to your own question. What you are doing right now is exactly what Rich Paul had in mind. Stop it. It was smoke and mirrors. It was a show. Bob Myers coming on ESPN and talking about that like he was breaking news. Bullshit. Stop it. He went 55. There were only a couple of spots left. He was almost drafted last. And now we're supposed to believe that he was so coveted by other teams that Rich Paul had to step in and make sure that it didn't happen. I'd like to hear the conversation. I'd like to hear those phone conversations. I was tempted to do an entire episode on this because then they had Antonio McDaniels come on here. And that was Antonio McDaniels' biggest evidence that Bronny might have gotten drafted without his dad. Oh, then how come Rich Paul was calling people? Give me the recordings of those phone calls. You know, stop being so gullible. And let's imagine how those phone calls went, if they even happened. You know, Rich Paul calling up a team. Don't draft Bronny or else he'll go to Australia. And the other line is just like, who's this? We aren't planning on drafting Bronny, but thanks for the call.
An NBA,
but
that
you
he wasn't an
also
NBA
heard,
player.
Right, but you also heard other ones saying he shot it well. He's a plus athlete. And Tom Haberstroh did a story.
Ah, yes, there's your credibility. Let's quote Tom Haberstroh, Yahoo Sports contributing writer. What a joke. Haberstroh's shown that he's on the Clutch Sports payroll, as Broussard has admitted that he is as well. And what were your other arguments? He shot the ball well and he's a plus athlete. These are your arguments for why he deserves to be in the NBA? I shoot the ball well. I'm a plus athlete. I'm not saying I could ever make it to the NBA, but you see how vague those compliments are? Those are meaningless.
I don't want to hear the nepotism card played. I don't want to hear from people that haven't said anything about the nepotism that is rampant in professional sports. Front office is a performance business as well.
Wow. What a great argument. Of course, I'm being sarcastic, and I'm embarrassed for anyone who heard that and jumped on board. Tell me when the last time there was a draft for front office positions. Tell me the last time there was a draft for coaching positions, assistant coaches or head coaches. It's obvious that they aren't measured the same. You have a limited roster to fill out with your best soldiers to win the war. You can have hundreds of generals back behind the line, but you only have certain soldiers that go to war for you, and they'd better be the best that you can get. And obviously the value of a soldier versus people calling the shots, that's demonstrated by the fact that we have a massive television event that's advertised for months ahead of time about the players, the soldiers. Don't you dare pretend that their value is measured the same at all. No one gives a shit what's happening in the front office until they F up as badly as Jeannie and Rob. And this is another example of them effing up. It's not a good thing.
Coaching staff is a performance business as well. And if...
My God. He actually said it. I said it before he said it. That's embarrassing. Stop it. Again, let me know the next time we have a coach draft.
If there, Rob, you know the league and the NFL and Major League Baseball.
Hey, your voice is crazy sounding. Are you kidding me?
Nepotism is rampant.
Only if we're including your pathetic, ridiculous coaching and front office positions and your, 2, 3 player examples that weren't even good examples?
Rampant.
Are you kidding me?
And so I don't want to hear when it's, a player flexed his muscles.
And now things start to head downhill quickly. First of all, comparing a player to what someone who owns the team does is ridiculous. A player does not have the rights of an owner. Come on. Look, here's the analogy. You got a guy who started his own store. Now it's a big store and he's hired employees, and you're comparing one of the employees strong-arming the owner about big decisions. That's a lot different than the owner making decisions. How can you compare an owner and an employee being able to do the same thing? How are you going to argue that the employee should have the same rights as the owner when you're talking about what that owner does with the business? If the owner makes terrible decisions and destroys his own company, it was his company. At least he didn't destroy someone else's company. It was his company to make bad decisions at, not yours. But it gets so much worse.
Chris Smith, heard of him?
No?
Played for the Knicks because J.R. Smith was on the Knicks. I mean, this has happened.
You're up to 2 player examples now, and they aren't strong ones. Maybe the most important part was my answer. No, haven't heard of Chris Smith. I had to go look it up. So it was a tiny contract, and it was done to appease J.R. Smith, which brings up some interesting questions because LeBron fans would like to claim that J.R. Smith was a nobody, and yet the Knicks were trying to appease him. So was he a great player or was he not a great player? But more importantly, he signed on during training camp, not drafted. They didn't give up a draft spot for that. And regardless, it was highly criticized. This article was ripping the Knicks apart for being so stupid as to do that. And here you are, Chris Broussard, trying to justify Jeannie and Rob making a bad decision by finding examples of other bad decisions.
It was a time when, heck, this was all the league did. They locked out black players that were qualified to play. I mean, in mass. So you had half the league, say, roughly, that was there not because it was a meritocracy. It's only become a meritocracy once they tore down the doors of segregation.
Right. That's the racism that was involved. Absolutely. And we already know that.
I'm just saying, but you can't say ever.
Now it gets tricky. Now it gets dicey for me to even talk about this because he brings up segregation, an age of racism. Things were worse then than now. And, it's not a good thing that it happened, but you're suggesting trying to correct the past by doing this. The sins of the past can't be corrected by the sins of the present. That's just not a good direction to go. And Broussard's the first one I heard flirt with that, but of course leave it to Stephen A. Smith to embrace that with both arms and run with it.
We live in a country where nepotism has taken place with white folks religiously forever. We've said little to nothing about it. In the NBA specifically, in a league where at least 70% of the players are black, we've seen nepotism with white folks all over the place.
Okay, let's just get this to the worst spot possible. Let's say that the white privilege was the worst it could possibly be. Just despicable. You want to correct that by mimicking the behavior that you just criticized? I mean, you're just talking about revenge now. You're not even talking about basketball or sports. I don't think there's any room to deny, especially in the past, that white people got to enjoy positions that they could, if you want to use the word abuse, then say abuse in this case. The bottom line here is no matter what we're talking about, basketball or other if you want to try and make up for the sins of the past by doing things today that resemble those things from the past, it just doesn't seem like it's going to head the right direction. For example, he's making this a black thing. It's also a rich thing, and the rich get richer and the powerful, because you are celebrating that LeBron James got his son, who doesn't need any money at all, onto a team in a spot that might have changed someone else's life. And I don't know who the last possible draftees were, but the fact that there's a strong likelihood that it was a black person, that it was an African American, that it was anyone other than just a white person already shows that progress has been made. You know, LeBron James stomped on another person's dreams for his own personal vendetta. This is not a social movement. This is not a civil rights movement. This is his ego. Now, Rob Parker kind of gave us a glimpse at where this will end, because he said once those racial walls were knocked down and non-white players were getting into these leagues, then the owners realized, okay, if we're gonna win, if we're gonna compete, we have to have the best players, no matter who they are. And that's where sports should be. Sports should be the best players. If you want to make this about money and empowerment, okay, then it's not about sports anymore. I guess I'm just speaking as a fan. We got to the point where the best people were being put on the floor. I thought that's where we got to. And now you're saying that we're making progress by going the other direction. This is not the same NBA. This is not a black and white NBA. There are many ethnicities playing in the NBA now. So if you want to say that nepotism is good as long as other colors are engaging in nepotism, well, are you considering how many people who worked hard, who are not white, worked hard to get into a draft position and will not be drafted because of this age of progress, this thing that you're celebrating now? I'm going to bring this to the close. No one wants to hear about this. And guess what? You're not going to want to see the NBA anymore either. It's already on its way down. And you're celebrating something that is going to contribute to not seeing the best players on the floor, not seeing the best possible competition. So don't pretend like you're happy about it, because you were a basketball fan before this got twisted into LeBron James is actually a civil rights activist. That is not why LeBron James did this.